welcome back to the Complete Student Podcast, everybody. We are so excited to have you here with us for this episode number 4 of season 2 of the Complete Student Podcast. This podcast is all about helping you incorporate your faith into the rest of your life and developing you in your life in leadership. So we're excited to jump into another conversation today that we believe is going to be really beneficial. Yep. And admittedly, I'm a little nervous about this one. Because it's a tough conversation, but I think one worth discussing. So I'm excited to just jump into this with you, Jackson. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Also nervous. I'm willing to bet more nervous than you are because you seem to have a page here of notes that I don't have. So I'm a little less prepared for you.
That's what we want to tell our listeners and viewers.
No, it's good. It's good. This is the conversation that we want.
This is it.
Well, today we're talking about cancel culture. Cancel culture is a practice on the internet. Basically, someone within the public eye does or says something that the majority of people on the internet recognize as wrong. As a result, they effectively remove this person's influence and platform to both punish them and ensure that they never have the opportunity to repeat their actions. So I want to ask, with this concept of cancel culture, before we get started, really diving into the rights, the wrongs, but do you think that cancel culture is a good thing?
Yes. Okay, so because we're talking about this, again, I admitted that I'm a little bit nervous to have this conversation. And one of the reasons why I'm nervous is because I'm afraid to say the wrong thing and accidentally, regret my actions or words that I say later. But I think that cancel culture, I feel like there's a couple different aspects of it. So in some senses, I think it could be a really good thing in terms of holding people accountable for actions that they've done in the past, things that they should be held accountable for. In another sense, I think it's one of the saddest realities of the internet is the rise of cancel culture, where anyone who steps out of line because of anything that they've said or anything that they've done, an action that they've taken, they're automatically a terrible person and can never be redeemed. And so that aspect of cancel culture for me is like one that I don't particularly care for. Much of the so-called cancel culture to me is just a form of people projecting maybe an attempt to offload the fear or shame that they have in themselves and rejection just by shaming and rejecting other people. So in particular, anyone I would say that's in leadership, has a level of influence, in power, all of these people become subjects, mostly are the ones who become subjects of cancel culture. So I think it's a really harsh thing. Again, admittedly nervous about some of the things that we might discuss just because it's one of those things that I also have a hard time just really processing fully. It's like, in some senses, I can totally understand the rise of cancel culture, the rise of holding people accountable. In another sense, I'm like, there's some things that I don't feel fully secure in what I necessarily believe about it, and like to the level in which we should so-called cancel people from society or their influence and all of that thing. So, but what about you? What do you think? Is cancel culture a good thing, a bad thing, maybe a little bit of both? How do you see it?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's a tough conversation to have because I think any amount of preparedness you feel a little inadequate. People who think they are so safe from cancel culture can get canceled. We practically canceled Ellen last year, and she was like the nice person brand, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, like you said, there's a lot of different, facets to this. There's a lot of different, areas of cancel culture. I think what it comes down to for me consistently is the idea of canceling someone's influence versus canceling them as a person. There's on the internet the idea that you can pull someone from their platform and the ability to influence people because they're using it wrongfully. Yeah. If you have power and influence and you use it to hurt other people, you shouldn't be able to have that influence. But I never want to take away your right as a person. I never want to devalue you as another individual. Right. So just like if someone was to do something wrong to me in real life, I would never cancel them as a person. I would say, hey, maybe we need to set up some new boundaries so that we don't do that again. Maybe I need to set up a new system where you're not as close as you were before. Right. But I would never cancel them as a person because that's not what Jesus ever did, I know. So it's difficult. It's dicey. Right. But I think the difference between saying you are a terrible person and what you did is wrong, we need to make changes, I think that's key. The difference there is important.
Yeah. Can I challenge that a little bit? Because
Absolutely.
I definitely think that there's like, okay, so this whole cancel culture has created this culture of fear for a lot of people. I think, especially if you're a person in leadership, person of power, you differentiated, canceling a person's influence versus canceling the person themselves. And even like people who are in positions of influence or leadership, I think about like a friend that I have who a little over a year ago when racial tensions were at their highest. This is a white guy who's a pastor who has influence, who wanted to be able to speak to certain things that were happening, but at the same time understood that he needed to like gain more of an understanding and whatnot too. So, but like there was this, I think there's this demand almost for him to speak out, to say something. But at the same time, there was this fear of like saying, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I'm not trying to like portray anything negatively. My intentions are good to say something right. But in trying to say something right, I may end up saying something wrong because it's created this culture of fear. And so that to me is like what makes it really hard. It's like even people of influence who could have their influence canceled, even if they have great intentions, they want to say something with pure motives, but say it the wrong way or say something they shouldn't have said, or maybe it came out of their mouth and they didn't mean for it to come out that way. Their words got twisted. They could still immediately be canceled in that moment. And it's like, man, that's so hard. And it's created just this level of fear. And I think of like, I remember early on in ministry, being at a church, and we had this staff meeting. We brought in someone from the outside to speak towards, this is before cancel culture, just to speak towards our staff culture and upholding ourselves to a high standard. And this was a pastor who had high level of influence, a big church, and just really just shot it straight with us and was like, any one of you could bring this whole thing down by your actions, or anything that you've done, that like anything that you've done or could do could like directly influence or impact this entire organization, bring the whole thing down. This was even before, cancel culture. And yet, it's still this whole idea of like we've got to be so careful, but at the same time, do we have room for grace? Andy Stanley says it this way. He says, all it takes is saying 5 wrong words for me to completely undo everything I've built. And sadly, like that's true. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's not an easy thing to differentiate, right? Because I think canceling someone as a person is never a route I want to go. Canceling someone's influence is a route that has to be taken with incredible care. I think cancel culture comes with a no context culture. Cancel culture comes with an ask questions later culture. I think the typical cancel culture is to hear something without investigation, without looking into it, then going to cancel.
Right. So, reactionary.
Yeah, very reactionary. And I think I don't want to write off holding people accountable completely. I remember I saw a tweet somewhere that said, we got cancel culture because nobody wanted accountability culture. So cancel culture is, I think, maybe our culture crying out for accountability in media and in influence. I don't think it's an inherently wrong desire. I think it's being done in the wrong way. I think holding people with influence accountable is important. I think people who have power should be responsible with it. I don't know that we need a one strike and you're out system. Yeah. Although I think we want to be wise about who we're showing to the next generation. Our children are seeing the people in influence, and I think we need to be careful about what they're seeing. That's difficult for me. I think the example that I've used in personal conversation is Logan Paul, who had filmed in a suicide forest, and that was an incredible misuse of his influence. Right. Terrible thing for kids to see, and he has a majority younger audience. Right. And he lost half of his ad revenue on that. Google took away him on their preferred. And so I don't know if I was against that. But I also don't know if that's canceling.
Right. So let me ask you this question. How do you feel about those instances where someone said something or did something years before they had the level of influence they have now? Since they've had this level of influence, they've never publicly said anything that would cause them to be canceled, but then people dig things up. It could be like a football player who tweeted something when they were a teenager. It could be, some of the more recent things of just people digging up old emails that someone had or whatever it might be. It's like while they've been in the spotlight, while they've had this level of influence, they've been good. But someone has gone back to research things that they've done in their past and canceled them for something that they did years before. And, where's the level of room for maturity, for growth? I mean, how do you feel about canceling someone based off their actions years before their level of influence?
So again, that's a tough conversation, but I want to go at it with the most, what would Jesus do kind of mentality. Think about how Jesus would approach this. And I can't think of a time in Scripture that I saw Jesus condemn someone for actions of long ago. I think Jesus addressed the heart, and the heart is something that is ever-changing and ever-flowing. And so I think Jesus was so much less concerned with the actions of people and more so concerned with the heart of people. And I think if our culture could adapt that mentality to look at someone's heart and say, okay, maybe 15 years ago they tweeted something kind of ridiculous or even horribly offensive. But if I can judge their heart today and if I can address their character today, then I can get a better understanding of where they're coming from. Additionally, I think, and I mentioned it earlier, but there are two sides to cancel culture, and one that is to deplatform and one that is to punish. And I think oftentimes when we're digging up tweets and old comments and videos from the past, it's more so to punish them by canceling. It's to say, you have done wrong, and now you will face justice. And again, I think I've said this in every podcast so far, but I don't think it's our job to be moral policemen. I don't think we should be enforcing justice in this way. I think if people can grow, if people can change and develop, then we should encourage that. And I think condemning people for actions of their past only speaks towards our culture that doesn't let people change. I think very early on we decide who someone is, and then it's very hard for us to change our minds on who that person is. Even speaking of Logan Paul, he's not really doing vlogging all that much. He's a boxer, he has a podcast, but he will always be the guy that made that big mistake. We've decided who he is. And it goes back to, am I canceling the person or canceling their influence? And I don't ever want to get to a place where I'm looking to cancel someone. So we talk about people digging up stuff from the past, and that scares me because it seems like our culture is almost excited to find something to cancel. We are thinking, oh, you know what has Rob Lowe been up to? And we go through Rob Lowe's Twitter, and we're just searching.
I don't think I've ever gone through Rob.
You don't think I don't even know if he has Twitter, if I'm being honest. But we think of a person and we wonder what we could cancel them for, and we go through their tweets. I was watching a video the other day about a celebrity who had been canceled, and the guy making the video had said he'd went through all of this guy's Twitter likes, all of his likes.
That's a lot of effort.
All of his following.
Yeah.
And to go through that much energy just to find something to cancel, I think it's the wrong heart. I think if we're going to have an accountability culture, it can't be out of searching. We can't go seeking things to cancel. So when I see that, personally for me, it makes me a little bit worried. Yeah. But yeah, well, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think as Christians, you alluded to the point that that you don't see Jesus, digging up people's past to try to address something they did long ago, but really addresses the heart. I think that one of the only stories that I can really pinpoint or think about as it relates to cancel culture would have been Jesus and the story of the woman who's caught in adultery. And I think that's a slightly modern day version of you had this group of people who see this woman doing something that she shouldn't be doing, and they drag her out to public. In our day, the public would be the social media pages, dragging someone out to public and then trying to shame them and punish them for their actions that they were caught in the middle of. And I think we see Jesus in that moment really he addressed her privately after the crowd went away. He didn't try to publicly jump online. They didn't have online back then, but he didn't publicly start condemning her and telling her what she's done wrong and heaping on this level of guilt that these others were trying to do. But he addressed her privately. I think as Christians, one of the ways that we can react is to really think about, do we have a personal connection with this person? Because again, we don't want to cancel the person. And so I think a lot of times, if you don't have a personal tie to the situation, you should think twice before posting about it online, because again, what's missing oftentimes is context, and we're void of that oftentimes. So I think unless you have, a personal connection where you can go to that person privately, where you can say like, hey man, what were you thinking? What were you doing? Like, hey, let's work on this together. Let's talk through this situation that you did, whether it's something you said or something you did, whatever. It's really hard for us to just publicly kind of just react to certain situations and then try to like make judgments and cancel people based off, something that we maybe know very little about. So I think one of the ways that we should be addressing people for their misconduct, one of the ways we can hold people accountable has to do with the personal connection we have to that person, because we want to hold them accountable. We want to make sure that we take the measures that we need to take to prevent things from happening again. But at the same time, like, we want to leave room for grace. We want to leave room for maturity. We want to leave room for people to accept their wrongdoing and to change their course of action, to change the direction their life is headed on, and move things in a positive direction. I don't think you can do that by publicly outcrying and shaming someone and canceling them.
Yeah, it's so common is the problem. It's something that we can stand here and we can say it doesn't reflect the heart of our God. And yet, even with our Christian circles, it seems really, really common. You look at Lauren Daigle, who got canceled for just saying the wrong thing. And the wrong thing, if I can remember what she said, was, I don't know.
Yeah.
We are so aggressive with someone who doesn't say the exact answer that we want, that doesn't follow the exact cause that we want. And it can be really dangerous to say, you disagree, so now I'm going to deplatform you. And it becomes,
or you just don't agree. Because like in that example, she didn't disagree. She just didn't agree.
Yeah.
Said, I don't know.
And it's so scary because we become closer to this uniform culture when we decide everyone that doesn't agree with this set of values has to be put out on the fringes. And I don't want to get to a culture that says if we have differences, then we can't coexist. I want to see a future where we can have differing opinions and differing perspectives, and our different backgrounds and experiences can come to play, and we can create a better world together. Yeah. But the more we cancel, I think the more we deny ourselves that opportunity. Right. So I think we kind of covered it, but how should we react on the outside as followers of Jesus when we see someone in the public eye as being canceled?
Okay, so again, we've talked about it a little bit, but like, we don't want to cancel the person. We do want to maybe cancel the influence to the level that is appropriate.
Maybe as a last resort.
Yes. I think, so one of the things that I think that as Christians we should strive for, because not only do we need to be careful of how we react to other people being canceled, but we also need to be careful of us ourselves not getting canceled. So one of the things that Proverbs 22:1 says, it says to choose a good reputation over great riches, being held in high esteem as better than silver or gold. Basically what that passage is saying to me is that we need to be more careful and more interested in how we are portraying ourselves, our personal brand, if you want to say it that way, than like the things that we get from having a personal brand or having a level of influence. Like, I think that if we work and we strive really hard at making sure that what we say, how we act is portrayed in the most Christ-like way, then we can really save ourselves from having to go down this path of like redemption or being worried or living out of fear of what we might do or say, because we can understand that like that's what we're striving for, is a good reputation to represent Christ well. I think when it comes to like how we should respond and react to other people being canceled, I think it's got to be responding out of grace, responding in such a way, like, again, this whole podcast is about how we take the teachings of Jesus, our faith as Christians, incorporating it into our everyday life. So if we're looking at the example of Jesus, again, I look to the woman who's caught in adultery. Again, wasn't something that he approached in a public way. It was something that he took and made it private, addressed it with grace, said, your sins are forgiven, go and sin no more, right? Like he extended a level of grace, but also put out a challenge in front of her to say, like, don't do this again, but like, I'm going to give you grace for this moment. Yeah. And, I don't know what the consequences would have been from Jesus had she gone out and just done the same thing over again. But I think like taking that initial step and reaction of let me try to find how I can offer this person grace for a mistake that they made, rather than immediately condemning, bringing them down, ready to stone them and kill them for whatever it is that they did.
Yeah. Just as you were saying that, it reminded me, if you want to hear a little bit more about that heart and that moment in contrast with our culture, you can go listen to Jesus is Our Advocate by Judah Smith on Spotify. Jesus is our advocate. He just talks about how, as our culture, we all have a stone in hand ready to throw at the next celebrity, the next person within the public eye that does wrong. And we've all created this holier than thou mentality within ourselves that, well, I'm way better than them. I would never say what Lauren Daigle said. And we have this attitude, and we look down, we've got rocks in our hands, and we're ready to throw the first stone. And Jesus says, yet let who is without sin throw the first stone. Yeah. And here we are, the sinful, casting stones. And it's a scary reality of our culture. I think two things about culture that really confuse me is it seems like our mainstream culture has this attitude that don't care what other people think, don't worry about what other people are saying, and then also this canceling mentality of how can you not care what we think? How can you not care about our opinions and our values? How could you? Yeah. And that contrast, I think, creates a really big storm within the public discourse. But I think that a prime example of this is Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt was straight up canceled for a couple of weeks. It obviously blew over since I don't think he's canceled right now. He has plenty of projects in the mainstream at the moment. But when I talk to my more left-leaning friends, it's obvious that they don't like him. There's sort of a stigma associated with his name on that half of the aisle in my experience. I think the primary motivation for this is that he publicly attends Zoe Church in Los Angeles, which has links to Hillsong, which has a mostly conservative reputation, and according to actor Elliot Page, is anti-LGBTQ. Chris Pratt denied that in an Instagram post, but that didn't really save him. He's also been criticized for being an alleged Trump supporter, although he's never publicly endorsed a political candidate, going as far as to clarify in 2017 that he doesn't identify with either party. He's also skipped a Joe Biden fundraiser in 2020, and there was one story that really got people riled up in which he was making a tribute to his wife on Instagram, and he mentioned that she had given him a beautiful, healthy child. And his child from his previous marriages had several medical complications, and people saw that as just sort of a sour taste in their mouths. Right. And I think there's just air that he is this kind of scuzzy guy because he goes to this really conservative, really hateful church in their eyes, and he doesn't seem to care about his previous family in their eyes, and he won't support the causes politically that they want in their eyes. And it all adds up to this kind of mountain of evidence for them that Chris Pratt's not a great guy. For me personally, I think that there's not enough pieces there for me to say, all right, let's cancel him. I think we are so quick to cancel. Yeah. And like I said before, we're digging for stuff. We are looking for ways to cancel this man. So I personally wasn't on board with that. But what were your thoughts on the cancellation of Chris Pratt?
Well, I think my initial reaction was like, how exactly does this cancel culture work? Because it seems like he's still getting roles. So if he's been canceled, why is he still like obviously still getting roles, still doing what he's been doing? Like it doesn't appear to be stopping him. Again, I'll say this again because I've already said it, but if you don't have a personal tie to the situation, then I think you should think twice about posting about it or mentioning it, trying to cancel someone that you don't have a personal experience with. So a lot of the people who are criticizing Chris Pratt for his attendance at Zoe Church probably have never attended Zoe Church, probably have never spoken with Chad Veach or the pastor there about his views on or stance on the LGBTQ situation or whatever. Like they don't have a personal connection. They don't, there's not enough context there. I don't know if any of us really know his current wife or his past wife. They don't know his son, who was not in that Instagram post. They don't know his daughter, who he was mentioning in the Instagram post. They don't know the context of that story. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, again, we're jumping in too quickly, and I think we need to slow down. I think we need to pause. We need to just say, like, what is our motivation in this moment to want to go out and try to cancel this guy? I think back to, like, when a lot of people wanted to cancel Chick-fil-A, And it's like, what's your motivation? Do you just not like their chicken sandwiches, or you just don't like the stance?
Nobody doesn't like the chicken sandwich. Let's get that.
Right.
It's an amazing chicken sandwich.
Right. I think that's where I want to land, is just like, what is your motivation behind canceling a person or an organization? What are you hoping to achieve out of that? Are you just really wanting them to like no longer exist? Because like for Chris Pratt, it's not like he's dead. He still exists and is going to continue to exist. So like in what ways are you really trying to cancel him? You just don't want to see him in movies anymore. You don't want to see his face in public anymore. Like, I'm sure people are following him around all the time, putting his face out there. So I don't know what the goal is. I don't know what the motivation is. For me, I'm not close enough to the situation to want to like cast any judgment, especially about things I have very little context about and don't really know a whole lot about.
Yeah, it reminds me of the verse in Proverbs, I believe it's 7:27, that says, as iron sharpens iron, a friend sharpens a friend. Friends sharpen friends. And we can have goodwill and great intention in going to the public and saying, this is how I will sharpen you. I will cancel you. This is how I will make the world a better place, by removing you. Not that that's not noble, but I don't know how effective it is. And I say that with a grain of salt, but I don't know how effective it is to go out into the public and start canceling people I have no relation to. Friends were meant to sharpen friends. I think it is unproductive to go out and make my voice the loudest voice and say, this person needs to be removed. And it's a lot within the series that we're in Youth right now. It starts with me. We can see all these problems in the world and we can start calling things out in other people and start canceling others. But at the end of the day, it starts with me. It starts with my house. If I look around, do my friends reflect the values that I want? Do I reflect the values that I want? And before I go to cast the first stone, I want to make sure that me and my house are taken care of.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you were listening to our current sermon series.
I was taking notes. Note takers are world changers.
Yeah, I think that everything that we've mentioned about it, I think is right on target. I personally feel good about this conversation that hopefully we won't get this podcast canceled from some of the things that we said or mentioned. But I think it's been a beneficial conversation, one that we've had the opportunity just to really think through and talk through what does this cancel culture look like? How as Christians should we respond to it? So I appreciate just you bringing some questions and like some examples, and I'm excited just to see how this conversation continues to play out. I hope that through this that we're able to continue to be better people, to live out our faith more authentically in the culture around us. And so it's been a great conversation.
Thanks
so much.
Appreciate you, boss.
All right. Well, we hope to see you guys back for our next episode of the Complete Student Podcast. We've got some other exciting conversations that we're going to have about how we incorporate our faith into our everyday life. So thanks again for listening to the Complete Student Podcast, and we'll see you back here next time.